Yeah. Yes. Huh. So you can you, is this on?
No.
No. Joe? Joe! No, no. That was working. This goddamn mute button, you know, just. So the question was from Mr. Rossi. I did the paper. I went, clicked on the Turn It In tab. So you click on paper assignment, and then you see a Turn It In tab, and then you click on the Turn It In tab, and you saw Contact Administrator. All right, I'm gonna have to check on that after class and send out an announcement. You're getting the Blackboard announcements, right? Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
They couldn't do anything in terms of your access to Blackboard. Content is on the way, but no one else is having that problem. So I would suggest if you have a moment today, physically going with your device to the desk, it's 2A 306. 2A 306. It's across from 2N toward the athletic fields. But there's that quad there. There's 1A, 3A, 2A. 2A is where the bursar is and security is. But there's, if you go upstairs in 2A, room 306, it's the tech help desk. Maybe you want to try that too, but I need to look into that, right? So these are two problems. One student's having trouble accessing Blackboard totally. And one is having trouble turning the paper in because when you click through, there's some note to contact administrator. That would be me in this instance, so I need to look at it. Yeah, you can email it to me. But, you know, it's better for us if that's a last resort, not a first resort, because I'd be trying to handle 160 emails with papers, right? What do I do with that? And if you turn it in, turn it in, we can mark it up and comment and grade it right there, rather than have to print. Or, you know, we can write in a Word document. I can't write in a PDF file. So, you know, I mean, it's much better for us if the thing goes in through turn it in and we can interact with you there in terms of your work and the writing and whatnot. So let me look at it. Everybody look for an announcement tonight about this, about possible glitches with the turn it in tab. Yes. No, I don't want it printed out. I want it handed in electronically on Blackboard, ideally, through the tab. That turn it in tab checks for plagiarism. Like you probably all are aware of this, right? Like it compares what you do. And obviously, if you're cutting and pasting something and you cite it, there's no problem if you cite the source. But if you're copying the content of the paper and you're not citing the source, that's cheating. Not to put too fine a point on it. So anything you consult, whether you quote it directly or you paraphrase it, if you use it in any way, you have to let us know what that source is. Something written, something you find on the internet. ChatGPT must be cited. You must say that you've consulted something. Otherwise, you could cut and paste the whole paper in and who would know that you didn't do anything at all, right? And then there's a continuum between totally fabricating the entire paper and trying to get away with that, which could result in a very severe consequence. And, oh, I didn't footnote this quote, right? It's a continuum of, let's say, culpability there. But it's better to err on the side of citing everything. None of us can think anything without other ideas and prior work and prior written. We can't think about anything unless we have other human beings to interact with through text or in conversations or whatever. So there's no shame in consulting and citing. But you have to cite. You have to, it's a matter of academic integrity. You have to tell us, I have to be able to go look at completely anything you consult or cite or use. I should be able, in theory, to go check everything you cite. That means you have to tell me about it so I can find it if I want to. I didn't go into this line of work to be a police officer. I think police work can be honorable work. We've been having kind of a critical conversation about policing and the Fourth Amendment and racial justice. I don't like being a cop. So just better all around if you just are very scrupulous about citing your sources. So Mr. Rossi, I will check on this. There will be an announcement on Blackboard. I want to repeat again that you should check your CSI email once a day as a matter of course, as a college student here, because so much information about your courses and other things come through that email. I know a lot of us don't like to use our work email or our school email. We like to use our Gmail or Yahoo or whatever we have. But do that. And we're ready to start here. I have a little question for you to begin while people are coming in and getting settled. There's a little slip of paper out and about out there that asks you to summarize the main point of Epp's article. You wouldn't have had to have read it. I'm going to summarize it today. So, you know, try to pay attention for the main point and be able to write 2 or 3 sentences. Use the back of the page. My printing and cutting them up wasn't exactly right today, so you can use the back of the file. I just print and sign your name so we know you're here. and write the main point of the lecture today, which is just a review of the arguments. But I want to begin with a question. How many of you have emailed or gone to office hours for any of your instructors this semester, that you've had a one-on-one conversation with anyone teaching you here at the College of Staten Island this semester? Raise your hand. Raise your hands, I want to see you. That's pretty good. But you should be aware that it's our job to interact with you. Some of us may be more responsive to emails more quickly than others. I found that to be true in my 15 years of teaching here. But we're available. So if you were to get out ahead of an assignment like the paper assignment that is due by the end of day Saturday, and the syllabus tells you how many points are deducted for each day late, you can do that. You can hand it in Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but there'll be deductions. And the deductions get larger as time goes on. The more you're late, the more points are taken off. But I will accept late papers with a deduction. But if you were to sort of be ready, even with an outline and a thought, and you were to contact one of us to kick it around, a 20-minute Zoom conversation, right? Zoom allows us to interact at our convenience. I didn't know what Zoom was before the pandemic, did you? But the faculty all have Zoom accounts we can use. I'm using one right now to record this. And I think it helps. It helps you emotionally, and it gives you more of an incentive to work on something if you discuss. So we are not averse to that. We will be responsive and we will talk with you about your ideas. Let's leave Professor Judd alone for tomorrow. She's busy, she's teaching, she's new here. But if you want to kick something around with me, email me. And I'll try. It's late, right? But maybe we could work something out Thursday, Friday, even Saturday morning. No, not Saturday morning. Thursday, Friday. Let me have my Saturday. But just in the future and in general, it's really good to communicate with your faculty. Even if you go to office hours, just to say, hey, hi, I'm in your class. Here's who I am. Here's where I've been. Here's where I want to go. Here's some questions I have about the course, maybe. You don't even have to have that. Ms. Powell? Say again? There you go. There's some text going on in our systems, I think. My work email is simply my name, Michael. Both emails are on the syllabus. It's michael.paris at csi.cuny.edu. That's the one you should probably use. That's first. I also have a Gmail account that I like to use, and you can use that as well, or you can send to both. Some of you have been sending to both. And that's my full name without any break, without the S on the end. So you think Michael Perry. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever done in my life. Because usually people put the S on it. Some guy in Northern California gets the email, and then he contacts me every 3 or 4 years and says, you're such an idiot. Why don't you get a new email address? Why would you use Michael Perry without the S? Well, there you have it. It's still there. So those are my email addresses. Please use them. But the Gmail account doesn't have the S at the end of Paris. It's michaelperry@gmail.com. Okay? But I'm glad to see that many of you, raised your hand, that you are communicating with your family. That's very important. It just helps. It helps us, it helps you. All right, we ready to begin? Good afternoon. This is the short class. And I want to pick up where we left off for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then, and there are some little tidbits and lessons in this New York City saga that I'm going to summarize very quickly. I didn't give you anything to read on it, so it is relevant though, right? We're talking about what is good police work. How can the police maximize their prevention of crime or their apprehension of people who commit crimes? What do we want the police to be doing? What don't we want them to doing? And what does law and courts have to do with it? Because this is, of course, about law, courts, lawyers, judges, jurors, and culture and politics. You may have figured out by now that me and tech things don't go along very well. But I try. So we left off talking briefly about the Diallo case, this great, some people might call it a murder, some people might call it a tragedy. It's certainly a killing that sparked a cascading series of events that led to a massive massive litigation effort to reform what the police in New York City were doing. And I want to just run through this and make a few points. Now, if you weren't here, the incident is summarized in these slides. This PowerPoint is now available to you on Blackboard. You click on content, and under unit, the folder in unit 2, this whole PowerPoint is there for you now. I tend to put them up near the end of the unit. So Diallo was an immigrant from Guyana and didn't speak English. He lived in the South Bronx. Under Rudy Giuliani, who's in the news again today. You gotta love America's mayor, right? I get this little Rudy Giuliani's alcoholism long whispered about has become an issue. Okay. We all have our names, right? Well, Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York City. He was elected in 1993, and he served 2 terms until 2001. He's probably best known for his steady hand and leadership after 9/11. He did do very well with that crisis for a week, and started believing he should be president after that. But before that, he really wanted to intensify aggressive policing, broken windows policing, which we'll talk about in a minute. And he instituted a plainclothes unit. 300 police officers would roam the streets in the middle of the night in the highest drug and crime-ridden neighborhoods, and basically stop and frisk people, right? And their policy was simply get the guns and the drugs off the street. Don't worry that much about the legal niceties. They're in plain clothes, and they're very aggressive. They almost became like commando units in these neighborhoods in Brooklyn and the Bronx, predominantly Upper Manhattan. And Diallo is just a law-abiding person. He's never been convicted of a crime. He's never been arrested for anything. He works. He's coming home very late from work one night, and 4 white police officers in plain clothes approach him. And they say they're identifying themselves as police officers, but it isn't clear. And it's probably not clear to him because he doesn't speak English, and they're in plain clothes. So he's frightened and he runs. And he runs into the vestibule down the street of his building where he lives. And there's an outer door that's open, wide open, and there's an inner door that's locked. When I was practicing law, sometimes those inner doors would be locked and sometimes they wouldn't, and it was a landlord-tenant issue, right? Because anyone could get in if there wasn't a lock. His door's locked, and as he gets to the door, he somehow thinks that maybe he's hearing them yell, "Police!" I don't know, but the police officers testify that he reaches in his back pocket, right? And they think he's going for a gun. Maybe the wallet comes out. Maybe the wallet looks like a gun, right? Maybe it looks like a gun. It might look like a gun. Put it away and it's your. You got the text out, or good, thank you. You can use devices if you're using them for class. Gonna be more like that. I'm sorry. I know it's not something I want to be doing, but I'll do it. And first cop through the door yells "gun" and opens fire. And once that happens, the other 3 cops open fire. And he's hit with some 26, 27 bullets. They fire 41 shots. he's done nothing wrong. This is a huge, at best, this is a huge mistake. And this is where we left off on Monday, and I asked, well, what's race got to do with this? If he's not a person of color, does this unfold this way? Maybe. I don't know. The trial, these officers are indicted for manslaughter. The trial is moved to Albany because we're going to get to this too when we talk about the jury later in the semester. They can't get a fair trial in the South Bronx because the trial will be for the jurors in the South Bronx about what they think of the police and not so much about the law that governs this situation. It's moved to Albany. Case is fully tried. 4 officers facing time for manslaughter. All 4 officers are acquitted on all counts. So they can no longer, most of the 3 of them no longer continue as police officers. One of the officers took the stand and testified and, totally broke down in tears. Genuine of fame, who knows? But that led to a series of events. That's the summary. And I want to introduce a concept that we're going to talk about next week and the week after. It's a fancy term, legal mobilization. Legal mobilization is what happens when people have demands or wants or desires or policy reforms that they want, and they translate those goals into a plausible legal case, and they bring it. It takes material resources, it takes legal skill and legal firepower, and it also involves ideational creative work, a framing kind of issue. And civil rights lawyers filed this lawsuit against the city of New York about these practices that are regressive and arguably violate both the 4th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. And that case is settled. And you say, well, the settlement is good because it requires the police to conduct themselves differently. They have to do community outreach to educate citizens about their rights, and they have to keep records, and they have to train their officers in the 4th Amendment. And as a result of that settlement, which means the case doesn't go to trial, the city settled it before trial, the judge signed off on the settlement. Now the police have to keep a little piece of paper that records every stop and checks the box for the reason for the stop. Okay, now we have this paper for every stop. Now think about what's going to happen with that. Well, for one thing, it could be a management tool. It could be a way that supervising police officers keep track of what their line officers are doing and maybe suggest that they do more than they're doing. More stops. But it's also a transparency device for us to know what the police are doing, where, when, and what's the racial breakdown of what they're doing, right? Well, the New York City Police Department doesn't change a thing, except it keeps these records. Doesn't do any of the other things. And almost 10 years later, reform advocates file a new lawsuit called Floyd v. City of New York. And those forms become really important because there are millions of them. And if they can be analyzed, you can know what the police are doing. And in this litigation, they're claiming the 4th Amendment is being systematically violated constantly. And the 14th Amendment is being violated because these stops are not just intrusive and illegal under the 4th Amendment, but racially discriminatory under the 14th. Is there a question? Comment? Okay. So I said that this is where we ended up. They made 4.4 million street stops in that 8-year period. 80% are young men of color. Blacks and Latinx groups make up 52% of the New York City population, but they're 80% of those stops. Half of those stops result in frisk. So that's 2.3 million stops with frisk and 1.5% yield A gun. Is this a little or a lot? So to think about, the case was filed in 2008, tried over 2 months of constant trial before a federal judge in 2013. I sat through 3 or 4 days of this trial myself. The court officers and police officers around were not happy that this was happening, and they were not polite to us observers. The judge ruled against New York City and came up with a series of orders that they had to obey, remedies that they had to follow. Bill de Blasio ran on changing this policy. He was elected that year. He would serve 2 terms. And once he became mayor, he said, all right, we're going to cooperate with these reformers. We're not going to fight them like Bloomberg and his commissioner, Ray Kelly, were. We're going to cooperate. We'll do what we can to try to cooperate. We're not going to appeal this adverse ruling from a federal district court judge. Sheriff Shineman, who was a joy to watch, she was just nasty to everybody. It was wonderful. And these remedies, I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but she hires a high-powered attorney to oversee the whole reform project. There have to be reports. They have to revise their training and supervision to make sure the police actually know what the Fourth Amendment is and what it requires. Now, we're not saying that you can't stop and frisk at all. We're just saying you need actual reasonable suspicion to do so. 250 to 300,000 of these stops where the box check was furtive movements, right? Furtive meaning nervously trying to avoid something. Just looking suspicious was the basis for hundreds of thousands of stops. People of color in these communities get organized to resist this stuff, this horrible practice of stopping and frisking everybody all the time. They're going to have to come in and have something to say in a process about what these reforms are going to be. You could call this an enhancement of democracy. We don't think of federal judges as democratic agents because they're not elected and they serve for life. That's not democratic. But if people don't have a voice in normal politics, maybe the courts can give them a voice. There was lots of activity here. I didn't follow the story of what all of these community meetings yielded, but there were hundreds of community meetings about reforming the police. Body-worn cameras was just brand new, and she said 1 precinct in each borough. Staten Island is a precinct overall. 1 precinct in each borough would experiment with body-worn cameras. Within a few years, every New York City police officer already can, and that's also the case nationally for the most part. You can't see that, right? Anyway, the high dot is 600,000 stops in 2012, and then that line plummets to 25,000. So we got 600,000 stops to over the next few years down to 25,000 stops. Litigation produced many fewer stops and frisks. The de Blasio administration was committed to the idea that this isn't really effective law enforcement. You know, are we getting any crime control out of all this aggressive policing is the question. That you can see. There's no relationship between stop and frisk and levels of crime. Why do we have crime this high or this low? That's very complicated. I think levels of crime have as much to do with unemployment rates as they do with what the police are doing. Police are doing other things. They're not just stopping and frisking. Some of those things may be effective. Stop and frisk has nothing to do with crime rates. All right. So, if we have time, and I suspect we won't, but if we have time, I want to show you a 13-minute clip about this that was kind of a homemade little documentary made in 2013. This kid who has been stopped a lot, audio stopped, and the police were rather impolite to him, and he had it recorded. This is before body cams. All right, so what I want to do now is run through the F article in the way I want you to read it and summarize it. So notice I'm not doing anything but describe, I'm not going to have any critical commentary on Epp. We could come up with some, but I'm just describing, I'm just summarizing. And I'm using the headings of the article to organize my thinking. I need to read it first, and then I need to go back and I use the subheadings, and I've even added Roman numerals to them to see the flow and the thread of the argument and how it's put together. So your task on your attendance sheet today is to summarize his main point. What's his main point? What can empirical research do for us? The Kennedy piece is lively, engaging, conceptually interesting, doesn't generate any new knowledge in terms of data, it's just facts, right? And Epp and his colleagues are really good social scientists, right? We're in a crisis. Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, George Floyd. We're in a crisis of policing and concerns about racism. This is an article about traffic stops exclusively. It's based on a 2014 book called Pulled Over. And this is an article, the title is Beyond Profiling. What does it mean beyond profiling? Why beyond profiling? The institutional sources of racial disparities in policing, and it's about traffic stops. What is the problem and what should we do about it? That's the question. Notice the thinking. There are really two broad types of answers. This is classic social scientific article writing. Really, there are two views of this. Big, bold strokes, neon signs, two perspectives on what the problem is. One, racism, prejudice. What is race? Race is irrational. What is race about? Race is about individuals who have prejudicial attitudes and values, and those prejudicial attitudes and values produce discriminatory behavior. And if you change those prejudicial attitudes and values, how? You change those discriminatory behaviors, cops are biased. They're either racist or they have unconscious bias that draws them to focus on people of color. After this colleague say that's not wrong, but that's kind of incomplete and not really the answer. Bad cops with bad attitudes ain't really what's going on. Although everybody thinks it is. President Obama appointed a task force on 21st century policing. He put FBI Director James Comey in charge of it. And it's all about better training. It's all about changing hearts and minds. It's all about attitudes and values. It's all about politeness. Problem is the police aren't terribly polite. Let's train them to be polite. And then Epp says, yeah, that is part of the problem, but it misses how some of policing's institutional structures and practices contribute to racial discrimination. It's not aberrant police attitudes, it's the policy. It's a feature, not a bug, as people sometimes say. And then they give us this concept of the investigatory police stop. I think that's an interesting term. It has a certain neutrality about it. It leaves open the question for a moment of whether it's good and bad. The more negative term for this is the pretextual stop. You made a wide turn. They don't care about Tyon Lee's wide turn in Louisville. Do they care that he made a wide right-hand turn? Maybe he made it and it is a traffic violation. They're not interested in the traffic violation. They want to search everything to see whether this kid has drugs or guns. And they actually tell him that. Right? But is it racism or is it the police policy of the investigatory stop? What's the practice and policy? Now, they also say past studies of these things have not distinguished between two types of traffic stops. There are a lot of traffic stops. I've experienced 3 in the last 10 years that are really about traffic violations. I rolled through a stop sign, pulled over, ticketed. I was going 15 miles an hour over a speed limit in a residential neighborhood. I was in a hurry. Stupid, you could hurt somebody, pulled over, ticketed. I want the police to do that. And you know what? After they did that, after they pulled me over and ticketed me for it, I didn't do it again for a long time. Right? Traffic safety is a thing. So they say, well, there are those kinds of stops. And if we investigate what goes on in those kinds of stops, stops that are really about serious traffic violations and traffic safety, is there any racial disparity in those? And you know what they find? No. People are treated more or less the same when it comes to that. Because the police are really interested in what you did. You were going 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. So you can't say that they're bigoted people targeting people of color, because they're not doing it for those stops. The prejudice comes into play in the context of a policy. And that's the policy of using small violations, any violation. They follow people around for 10, 15, 20 blocks until you don't signal for a turn, or you go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, any reason to stop you. And then they're aggressive. What are you doing here? Any guns? Any drugs? Mind if I search your car? What happens with those stops? Well, there's a big racial impact if we cut the universe that way. Those stops show racism run amok as policy. You know? All right. Bear with me. Nothing wrong with technology. Okay. So the investigatory stop has become something that police do. There's no written law, no legislative body says, let's do investigatory stop. How does this come to be? Here we talk about something we refer to as organizational culture, the spread of practices and ideas across organizations that don't have anything to do with each other. There's thousands and thousands of local police agencies. But through professional networks, this becomes understood to be good, right, just, and great police practice. And his argument is that's actually kind of stupid. And here's where I would have a critique. You know, if something doesn't make sense based on its proper justification, crime control, and you can't show any connection between aggressive police stops that are investigatory and crime control, then maybe there's another explanation we need to look for, which might be something a little more radical as a statement, like maybe the police are really organizations that control populations in certain areas and scoop them up, get them into the system, track them, give them a number, degrade them, humiliate them. That may be a social practice of using the police as a kind of occupying army. Abbott would never say such a thing. He's from the Midwest, and he believes in good faith and reasonability, like kind of crazy black people who thinks we should fund the police, you know. Now I'm screwed. You know why? Because I just threw the damn thing under the stage. And I'm not sure yet whether I care or not. I'm gonna need a very long pole to retrieve that clicker. It's only worth about $300. Am I being entertaining yet? I'm gonna dance. Anybody just did that? I see what I did now. What time is it?
It is 12:55.
I have 15 minutes left. Right?
That is your call.
Well, no, I have 15 minutes left. Bear with me. I went to law school. I'm constantly thinking on my feet a little bit. Well, that's true. You can start working on your answer now, right? Society. So, Mr. Rossi, you there? While we're here, what do you see? How far?
There's no room, man.
Well, it went a little more that way. I appreciate it. See if you can see it. Mr. Rossi? Yeah. Let's see what happens. So when you go to submit your paper, why are people coming and going with 50 miles?
Actually, stop this. If you don't have a little piece of paper, you have a notebook. Write it down, and then the piece of the paper will be up in front, and then you can transfer it to the back. Okay?
That's all right. It's, yeah, fine. You're getting up to get the slip, you can just raise your hand. I thought people would just go to the back. So, Mr. Rossi. Yeah. I'm gonna click on this link. All right, so this is gonna be true for everybody, and I have to fix it tonight. Wish me luck. I don't know, I've never seen that before. Content. Unit 2. PowerPoint for unit 2. Pull it up. All right. So up here now. So this is the problem. And what they're saying is, you know, these prior studies don't make this distinction. The investigatory stop is a distinct, widespread, institutionalized practice, one that we miss if we just focus on all traffic stops. So prior social scientists were looking at all traffic stops and looking for racial patterns, and they found much less racism for all traffic stops compared to pedestrian stops. And that makes sense. If a good chunk of those stops are traffic safety stops, and there's no racism in those, we walk out some of the racism of the investigatory stop. It's not a written policy to use pretextual traffic violations to stop people and try to intrude on them. It's a practice. It's a matter of culture and practice. They look at training manuals for police where you can find this idea of the investigatory stop. They look at the publications of policing organizations. This is an argument about organizational culture making policy, even though you and I are not making this policy through our elected representatives. And they see that all kinds of police departments, rural, urban, south, northwest, all of these police departments are converging on this practice. We can skip over why. Does everybody know what broken windows policing means? It's a very simple idea. It became popular in the late 70s and early 1980s. The main promulgator is a guy, a political scientist named James Q. Wilson. I guess his name was James Wilson. You'd have it. Q, just to distinguish yourself. And broken windows policing is basically if you let the small violations go, you tolerate urinating in public or jumping the turnstile, then larger violations are made more likely. You need to have order maintenance and you need to sweat the small stuff in order to prevent the larger stuff, right? Broken windows as a phrase comes from an observation of someone else. Say you have an abandoned car in a neighborhood, nobody touches that car for a week or two, but then once somebody throws a rock through the window, the car gets destroyed like right away. Like everybody piles on and just starts beating up the car, right? The U.S. Supreme Court, in a case I didn't give you very complicated set of facts, but in 1996, the U.S. Supreme Court said this is fine, as long as there was really a violation, as long as you rolled through the stop sign or you didn't signal your turn, even if the intent is not to enforce traffic laws, if the intent is to badger and cajole and get consent to search, this is okay under the Fourth Amendment. That's a very controversial ruling. But once we have the investigatory stop, then the prejudicial attitudes and values have a wide berth to rule. That's when those, they're not like people who don't have these unconscious biases or racial prejudices, they do. But having a policy of the investigatory stop gives free rein to those individual level biases. Individual institutions don't act, right? Individuals act in institutional settings. They make choices within an institutional setting. So that's the argument. I like the research design and the method. It's a stratified random sample. Stratified means we take a population. Here, the driving population of Kansas City metropolitan area. Epp teaches at the University of Kansas. And we break down subgroups and we survey them in a representative fashion. So I put on the slide what they've asked the drivers in their survey. They surveyed 2,300 drivers, and from that they derived a subgroup of the 500 plus drivers who have experienced investigatory stops, and they interviewed them. Right? So I think this is kind of neat, actually, because this gets at, we always take the point of view of the police. The courts typically see things from the point of view of the police. The courts typically believe the police account of what happened. Here we get social scientists talking to drivers about what they experienced, and there's some pretty graphic examples here. Here the racism is very clear. African Americans controlling for all other variables you could imagine, or at least reasonably understand. That is, everything else is held constant. The make of the car, the age of the car, the class background of the driver. We can hold those constants statistically, and we see that African Americans were 2.7 times more likely to experience this kind of traffic stop in Kansas City, and they were more than 5 times likely than white people to be searched. Not too many Latinx groups in Kansas City yet at this time, so it's mostly a white black thing here. This is harmful, and the harms have been underappreciated. And here, this dovetails Kennedy. When you're stopped for a trivial reason, how do you feel? What's it like when you know that, oh, wide turn? Oh, 3 miles an hour over the speed limit? Really? Like, really? What's the real reason you're stopping me? Now, the officer may be just carrying out orders from above, right? Like, this is what I need to be doing. Those officers in Louisville said that. We're doing our job as our supervisor's command. And I think command is the word. So who do we blame? We blame the doorkeeper there who brings the dog out. We blame the chief of police. We blame all the white powerful people in Louisville who want this done. Who do we blame if we're going to blame somebody? How do we change it if we think it needs to be changed? There's also fear, right? I mean, when you create fear, you create resentment against the police, and that might undermine policing. They find that even if the officer starts out when he stops politely, there's an easy and there's a path to degeneration because the motorist is resentful and fearful at the get-go, right? So this might degenerate very easily. And once a question is asked, they give the account of someone who said, "You just stopped me because I'm a poor person in a ragged car." And the answer to that question, that comment from the driver, was that the officer pulled his gun and pointed it at the driver's head. It's in the article. No reason to disbelieve the man, right? Yeah. Well, police officers are trained to expect the worst, and they're trained to control the situation. They have control of the situation at all times. Who cares if they put this guy in apprehension of being murdered, right? Harm to the community, residential segregation is enforced. Erosion of trust makes policing harder. I said that. Even less willingness to call the police for help. That's not good. And also, you know, for those of you who think, as I do, hope someday in 100 years, 200 years, racial identity is something softer, like, you know, like, oh, I'm Irish, or I'm Italian, like, who hope for an easing of the constraints of societal stereotypes and what race means. The experience of these stops makes people more identified with their racial privilege. And understanding, you stop me because I'm Black, I have a linked faith with all Black people, however defined, and it really isn't us, and you really are treated unfair, right? So you're reinforcing that sense of race. That argues. I'm summarizing an argument, I'm not endorsing it. What about crime control? Well, prove it. Show me a relationship between this kind of police activity and crime rates. You can't do it. Very complicated question. You can't say for sure that aggressive policing doesn't give you something in terms of crime control, but you can't really prove it. What are you getting out of this? It's ineffective and morally repugnant, the authors argue. What is to be done? Cut it out. Stop it. Stop these stops. Just don't do it. How do you get there? How do you control the police? And if you can't do that, can you at least create better record keeping and reporting so the public could know what's going on and have a sense of it, right? That might be better record keeping for every stop, whether a citation is issued or not. Pulling someone over for an investigatory reason will often result in a warning, not a ticket. And if it's not reported, we never know what happened, right? Lots of warnings. I was on a police accountability board in my little town in New Jersey for 2 years. We didn't have any personnel disciplinary power. We just had policy advisory power. But I was in communication with, I know Epp a bit. I was in communication with him about this. He said, yeah, you can do that. Also, you know, when you go on the phone and someone at the bank helps you or someone at Amazon helps, you know, usually, you ever have that? Like, stay on the line for a consumer survey to say how I did, right? You've had that experience when you've been asked to give feedback on the quality of service for some business at the auto shop, whatever. Why not give the motorist a card with a website where they can anonymously say what they thought of the stop? Police don't like that idea. I had an even better idea that even Chuck Epp didn't like. Make the police officer state the reason for the stop before the stop takes place on the radio and record it. Why are you stopping this? Because you can make up a lot of things that's bad, right? Stop first, deal with reasonable suspicion later. And then you're in a, you know, if you find guns or drugs, you're going to be believed when you make up your reason. He said that might take up airtime on the airwaves for the police, and it might not work. So that's that. What time is it now?
It is 1:09 and a half.
I like this answer here. You said 1:08, and you said 1:09 and a half, but I do think I kind of believe you have a precise timepiece. That gives me 20 seconds. Well, I'm going to try to make myself available to talk with you about the papers. I can't guarantee it because there's a lot of you. And we're not bothering because there's none of this right now, okay, you bother me. And, thank you for your time, we'll take your bill, there's little slips, this is more election, less discussion, I don't know how you feel about that. We're gonna pick it up, if not next week, hey, how are you? But, you have, like, what is? Yeah, you can just leave them on the desk, name, print name, sign name, write the manager.
Because they don't help like.
That's on my voice. So, the first half is it's also basically. Yeah, I'll fix it.
Due on Saturday.
End of day Saturday, yes.
The court is due on Friday.
Yes, that's true, but from the day like posting it, I send it to the wall.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So Evidente, I have you here. Your attendance is still important.
Yeah, I do, but when I checked it, I got complete hits the turn it in thing, because I wasn't doing anything in.
No worries. You know, a way I can get down there?